Hey everybody, I'm Jack Reeder with Future Pastimes, and I'm the designer of Firefly Misbehavin, a deck-building card game set in the Firefly verse. And I've been going over the cards in each of the three markets that have the circle attribute at the very bottom of the cards. Each of those markets is divided up into three different sets of cards: circle, triangle, and square. And that is largely so that you can have specific sets of cards together for some of the episode cards, which can change up the win conditions or other play conditions of the game. And you do have the three markets: the core space, the border space, and the rim space. So in this one, we're going to be focusing on the rim space cards. And all of the circle cards are going to be cards that are in every game of Firefly, unless you specifically decide to exclude them. They largely contain the main characters from the show, so those that aren't a part of Serenity's starting deck, which only contains Mal and Zoe. So the other main characters like River and Simon and Wash and whatnot, they're all in those circle cards. But they are in the core deck and the border deck, so none of them are in the rim deck. But there are a couple other familiar things in that rim deck as I was dividing up which cards were going to be in one. So you get cards that belong together in the same little sets, and that will come clear as I review what's in the rim deck for those cards. So I'm going to cover those few cards that are in the circles for the rim deck, what they do, and talk a little bit about why they're in there. So we're going to start off with Bonanza, which is another Firefly, so it has a ship attribute. And these other Fireflies that we added to the game, they are drawn right from the other Gale Force 9 Firefly game called Firefly, the game. It was nice to be able to cross-pollinate some of the assets from that game into this one. So they had the other ships. I covered the Yunchi, which is in the core deck. So we have Bonanza. So it does have the ship attribute. It costs 5 if you want to get it. It gives you an influence that you can use for recruitment and has 3 power when it's in the tableau. And it has an ability that does not require an activation to use. So it's just if this is in play, you can say, yeah, I'm going to use that. And it's gain a maneuver card from the supply board when you win a fight. So if you're in a fight and you've got Bonanza in play, and that could be in the display area, although it doesn't have the fight attribute, so it really wouldn't be in there. So just in your tableau, you can gain a maneuver card. And when you gain cards, those go right into your recycle pile, so you're just adding it to your deck. So this can be a very handy card, especially if you are using those maneuvers. And this is great because most of the maneuvers require you to have a ship. So you'll have a ship in play, and then you're picking up maneuvers for free, which is going to be pretty nice. So the Bonanza will be very helpful if you're using a maneuver strategy with your deck. Our next card is Bree. This is a character from one of the episodes. It's one of the episodes that has Saffron in it, and she is also a circle card, so you get some synergy there. So he's a character that costs 4. No influence, does have 2 power when he's in the tableau, and he has an ability that requires an activation. So you have to discard a card with the ship attribute and an asset, and then it's got to be both of those things, which most ships are, and it lets you just draw 2 cards. So this is somebody that can make good use of ships that you don't necessarily need to have in play in order to get to some other cards that you might need, like fight cards or cards with influence. And Bree was a member of the crew of the Carrion House, so that's why these two are together. So this is an asset. It costs 5. It gives you 1 influence, so you can use that for recruitments. 1 power in the tableau. It has a pretty good ability. It does require an activation. You discard an asset from your tableau to gain 3 credits. So this is a good card for picking up credits, but it does require you to have put an asset into your tableau and then discard that in order to gain that. But you could, for instance, have Bonanza in your tableau, discard that to get 3 credits, which you might want to use for making a deal or some other effect. And then the other crew member of the Carrion House is Corbin. So he's in this circle set as well. Again, circles are all down there. Cost 5. He can make a deal, so he has a deal attribute. He's got the 1 influence and the 1 power. Another activated ability. Add any card from your recycle pile to your hand, then discard 2 cards from your hand. So this is somebody that can really optimize what you didn't draw, what you wanted, what you really wanted. You know that you have discarded it. This lets you get that back into your hand. For instance, you might want a Misbehave that you had to discard earlier because you weren't in a fight, and now you are in a fight. So if you're able to spend the activation during a fight while he's in play, you can then trigger him, get that card, and then get rid of some non-fight cards that were not going to help you out in that case. Our next card is the Hacking Rig. So this is an item, cost 4, has no influence and no power, but it does have a pretty useful ability. So you would have to either have it in play or use your activation to play it and then trigger it. But you discard this card, and it lets you trigger a card in another player's tableau without effect. And then you gain an activation. So the first part of that, trigger a card in a tableau without effect. What does that mean, and why is that useful? Well, anytime a card is triggered in a tableau, that means that card cannot be used for its influence, its power, or its ability. It can't be moved into your display area in a fight. It's basically just out of it. It's out of it until the start of that player's next turn, in which the cards will reset. So if you're going to get into a fight, for example, or you want to prevent somebody from using an ability, or like some cards will let you cancel a deal, and you can see that they've got those cards out there, or whatever it is that you want to interfere with them, the Hacking Rig will basically let you hack their tableau and trigger one of those cards so that it's not going to be usable for anything. So that can be very handy. Our next card is a big one here. It's the IAV Dortmunder. So this is an Alliance ship, and it does have the Alliance logo up there in the corner, which means that the Alliance player, if they're playing, they can spend verse tokens to lower the cost of this. So each verse token they spend reduces the cost by 1. So it can be very useful for helping them to get this card, because this is a pretty good card to have. Costs 7, so very expensive to get, but that 7 is also its defense. So if they do get it and they get it into a tableau where it's adding its 3 power, then it can be very powerful and hard to take. It has a ship attribute, of course, it has a fight attribute, so they can bring this 3 power into a fight. It has an X here under influence. So the card's influence is 1 for each core space card in play. And that feeds right into the Alliance's deck. So they are the only ones that have a core space card. They have 2 in their starting deck. And it's part of how they can potentially have more influence in their starting deck, but they've got to line up those cards. They got to have each one is worth the number of other core space cards in play. So having 1 core space is useless to the Alliance. Having 2 means that they have 2. And they have their own ship like this, not the Dortmunder, but another one that can boost that influence as well. So this one, if they get those core space cards in play, whether they're in the tableau or in the display area, then they can potentially have 1 or 2 more influence for this card as well. So all around, it's a great card for the Alliance. Not as great for anybody else, although it is a ship and it has 3 in a fight. So if somebody else has picked up the Dortmunder and basically has it under their thumb, then it can be very powerful for them. Our next card is Lilac. So this is a planet. It's got a location attribute on there. It costs 5. No influence, but 2 power. It's got a decent ability, so you can trigger it. Costs an activation to do that. To discard any card with the fight attribute, and you can gain 2 credits. So it's a potentially a planet that can get you some income. So then on the turn, you've got maybe a fight card, and you're like, I don't have enough fight to get into a fight, but I could earn some credits. So that could be handy for that. Down to our last 2. So we have another character. We have Tracy Smith. So this is an old pal of Mal and Zoe's. And that's why he's got Serenity's icon right there. So he is easier for them to recruit if they want to. He's in a fight. Brings 1 into a fight. No influence. And his ability, if you spend an activation, is you can gain another recruitment. So not totally useless, but it's going to be pretty situational that you would need that. So you'd have to have a lot of influence. And you say, all right, yeah, I'll use my activation so that I can at least split that influence up into getting multiple cards. So you could get a couple of different shinies. If you've got a lot of influence, you could maybe get a couple of misbehaves or one of each of those. So there have definitely been times where Tracer Myth was useful with that ability. And then our last card is Vera. And so Vera, of course, is Jane's favorite gun. So this is an item. Costs 4, so not that much to get. It's got 3 power and a fight attribute, so it's adding 3 power when you use this in a fight. And this is one of the few cards in the game that has a specific synergy with another card, and that card, of course, is Jane. So its ability does not require an activation. It's just while this card is in play, you do not need to spend 1 credit to keep Jane Cobb in play. And so that's one of Jane Cobb's little statuses there, is he's a character that brings 3 power, but keeping him in the tableau means that you have to spend a credit, otherwise he gets discarded. So if you've got Vera in there, that's all the incentive he needs to stick around. You don't have to spend that credit. And if you've got Vera and Jane Cobb in your tableau, that's 6 power right there. So very difficult to deal with, although Vera, not that hard to nab away from somebody because its defense is only 4. So that's what you've got in the Rim deck. So like I said, these cards are divided up into those categories, the circle, the triangle, and the square, so that you can curate the kind of game that you want. You can throw them all in there. That's 25 cards. There's a lot more randomness in terms of which ones are going to show up in the markets. There's only ever 2 from each of those sections of space that are going to be face up at any given time. But if you're like, well, we want to focus on these groups of characters or this particular kind of storyline, or you're using an episode that dictates which market cards to use. So it'll say things like use circle and square. And that's because the plot of that particular episode is trying to get to certain types of cards that you're more likely to get to with those specific types of market cards. So like if you're like, oh, we have to make sure we have ships, then it's going to include the ones that are more likely to have ships in there. So, but like I said, the circles, all of the episode cards will require you to use the circles. But again, you can customize the game how you want. And you could say, yeah, we're just going to use the triangle cards for sort of an unusual early days of Serenity kind of experience where we're not going to see any of those characters, but we're going to see some other stuff on there. And I kind of feel like every game of Misbehavin feels like its own episode of the show. So you're not seeing the whole swath of cards. You're seeing little sections of cards on there, which is kind of on brand for what an episode of Firefly would feel like. So you would see some of those, but again, you can customize that a little bit. So let me know your thoughts on these, if you have any questions on the Rim deck or why certain cards were put in there and certain ones aren't. And I may cover some of the other, like what's in the square cards, what's in the triangle cards, to give a sense of how each of those groupings of cards differs and the reasoning behind it. But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.